Hey guys, I want to talk about fever phobia. I'm going to wear a conventional medical hat today instead of my usual functional medicine hat. I found this article. I was in the ER last night at Yoakum. Had a fun night with the crew. And I found this newspaper sitting on the table in the doctor's lounge, and I just picked it up, started reading through it, and found this fever phobia article. And I want to talk to you guys about it because there's a lot of fever phobia. Basically, phobia meaning scared. We're scared of a fever. As soon as a parent sees a fever, or a sibling or a grandmother or something sees a fever, they immediately want to take them to the doctor and get treated. And it's like a fever is something that needs to be stomped out. So I'm actually not going to rant to you, even though I kind of like ranting if you've seen any of my other videos. But I'm going to read to you from this article of the functional or the conventional side of medicine that's talking about a fever and how to treat it. So let's go over it. First of all, are helicopter parents to blame for seemingly excessive number of ED and urgent care visits over fever? Unfortunately, we've got an over-medicalized society right now, and that's part of the reason why the healthcare industry is so expensive and bankrupting our country. The cost for fevers is billions of dollars a year for a fever. Fevers don't harm anyone, okay? So here's the case scenario that they start off with. Us doctors like to start with case scenarios, right? So it's after midnight. This is perfect for me. It is after midnight and the preschooler running around your ED is showing considerably more energy than you feel as you step in your room to talk to his parents. Your general rule: children who are difficult to catch and examine are unlikely to be seriously ill. You're fairly certain this belief is going to be confirmed by your physical exam. But then again, do you really know for sure the child is an otherwise healthy, fully immunized 2-year-old boy, and the reason the parents came to the ED in the middle of the night was that this evening when they checked on him, he felt warm and his rectal temperature was 39 degrees Celsius, which is around 102, for which he was given ibuprofen. Props to them for checking a rectal temperature. I don't know many people that do that these days, but it is the only real, true body temperature check. When you ask why they come to the emergency department, they look at you with complete surprise. Obviously, they say, his pediatrician's office isn't open at night. But why, you reply? Do you feel your generally healthy little boy needed to be seen right away? Their answer: because he has a fever. And the cost for this? Billions of dollars a year. So I'm going to go through a few basic points about a fever, and this goes for adults and children, although primarily this article is based on children. So let's go through a few points. Fevers are not dangerous by themselves. It says it right there. See, fevers are not dangerous by themselves. They do not cause brain damage, and they do not cause death. So a fever is a natural response by the body, means it's fighting something. Chances are 90% of the time that it is going to be a viral cause. If your child or yourself feel perfectly fine and just have a fever, it does not mean that you have anything life-threatening. If your child is running around playing and has a fever, then it's probably nothing life-threatening. The body has an internal regulator on how high the fever goes. The fever is meant to help protect you from illness. It's not designed to cook your brain. So yes, you can die of heat stroke when your body temperature goes too high, but that's from a different reason. That's not from a virus stimulating a fever. So the only times you have to worry, next line, is if you have a fever for more than 72 hours, that's reasonable, or if the temperature is starting to go above 105.8 rectally, that is. I've never seen that high of a temperature, so it's reasonable to be alarmed. The other thing not to worry about is there's nothing to worry about as far as how high the fever is unless it breaks that 105.8. It doesn't matter if the temperature is 100.4, which is the technical start of a fever by most regulations and guidelines, or if it's 104. A fever is just the body's response to the infection. So if it's 102, if it's 101, that doesn't matter, and it doesn't need to be treated unless the child is uncomfortable. That's the goal of treating a fever, is only if the child or yourself feels uncomfortable. It is not necessary to treat every fever. It is only for the child's comfort. Don't wake them up to treat them or follow them around constantly checking their temperature. It is the appearance of the child, the accompanying signs or symptoms, and the duration of the illness, not the fever itself, that are important. So if your child is ill, if he's lethargic or she's lethargic and coughing and wheezing and just generally not looking well and has a fever, definitely needs to be checked out. But if they're just running around playing, even if they don't have an appetite or not drinking much, that's okay. It's just a fever. And oftentimes kids will have windows where they're playful and fine, and then another window they might be a little lazy, taking a nap when they usually wouldn't. But as long as they have those playful episodes, usually that means that the fever is nothing to worry about and it's just a virus. You can save yourself a trip to the doctor and save yourself a little bit of money. I'm not done. So they went on to survey the world about what people think about a fever around the world. And it turns out that doctors and the medical society is responsible for making too much scare over a fever, this fever phobia. And we do it in the ER. As soon as someone comes in with a fever, the nurses run around, get some Tylenol and Motrin, and we got to get that fever down. And so we even propagate this idea that a fever is something to be treated and this fever needs to go down. It's poor form if you don't treat the fever in the ER. And I've even been almost crucified by a nurse, I won't say where or who, for discharging a child that still had a fever. Came in with a fever, gave him some Tylenol, and the fever still wasn't down. And I examined the child, thought, oh, it's just a virus. She looks perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and discharge her. And she refused to discharge the patient until the fever was down within a regular range because she thought that was poor. I'm here to tell you that you can have a fever at home and be perfectly fine. If the child looks well and the doctor says it's just a viral illness, then chances are it's just a viral illness and you don't have to treat the fever if the child looks good, and you can certainly be discharged from the ER. So anyway, the medical society is partially responsible for propagating this. But it turns out that they did several surveys, but I circled this one. Whoever they surveyed, looks like this one's 100 caregivers in California, so parents, guardians, daycare, whatever. 93% of people that were surveyed, 93%, that's like all of them, believed a high fever could cause brain damage. I don't know who created this falsity, but that's not true. A fever created by your own body, your brain is regulating the temperature. It's not going to cook itself. It's not like a scrambled egg. It's not just going to turn on and keep going until it cooks. And so their conclusion was that fever phobia is very common throughout the world and cannot be explained by geography, which means it's outside of the U.S. in addition to inside the U.S., or child mortality, which means we don't have any case studies to back up that fevers aren't necessarily killing children. In that regard, there's a lot of scare over febrile seizures or seizures that are caused by fever, and it seems backwards, but there's no way to prevent seizures by treating the fever, because the seizures usually onset when the fever is rising, and there's no way to know because that's going to be their first fever, and you can't treat something that you didn't know existed. And then they've done studies and shown that even if you control the fever, if a child's going to have a seizure, they're just going to have a seizure regardless of the temperature, regardless of if you treat. And so people that have febrile seizures, while they're scary for parents, and I've never had a child have a seizure, so I can't imagine how you react, but if your child does suffer from fever seizures, then that's not necessarily something that you really have to aggressively treat or run around with a thermometer chasing them, checking their temperature every minute. But that's kind of a side note. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, the main group of pediatricians that decide on stuff and make regulations and recommendations for all the pediatricians in the United States, and generally our recommendations go around the world, they said, this is from the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, in 2011. They reiterated that the purpose, or sorry, it was from a report in 2011, but this is a new 2017 paper. So they just said this in 2017. They reiterated that the purpose of treating a fever in an otherwise normal child is to improve their overall comfort. Reducing a fever does not impact morbidity or mortality. That's saying that they're not going to die from it, they're not going to have serious injury, they're not going to get harmed from it. So let me reread that. Reducing a fever does not impact morbidity or mortality from febrile illness in such children. And there is no evidence or proof that antipyretics, or Tylenol, reduce the recurrence of febrile seizures. So there you have it, written by the AAP. Treating the fever doesn't do anything for the seizure, unfortunately. So to summarize, the 3 points I want to drive home are if you're treating a fever, it's for comfort. So if the child's already comfortable, you're not really going to gain much ground there. It has no impact, treating the fever has no impact on death or serious harm. and it does not mean that you've got a serious bacterial infection that needs an immediate evaluation by a doctor. And 3, it doesn't reduce seizures, so why are we treating? I've been seeing some posts on Facebook. I don't know the data or efficacy or evidence on this, so please take this part with a grain of salt. But I've been seeing some links to Tylenol and autism, or some suggestions that there's links to Tylenol and autism. That's not something I've personally looked up, but I just throw that out there because if you're worried about autism, then that might be something you want to think about before you just start giving your child Tylenol. Tylenol does utilize our glutathione pathways, and if you've watched any of my other videos, glutathione is a major antioxidant and detoxifier of the body and regulates inflammation and things. So giving your child too much Tylenol and Motrin may be burning up their glutathione stores. Another point I like to make is when a child has a fever, there's really no need to strip off their clothes and soak them in an ice bath or throw them in a tub. That's really just uncomfortable to the child. The fever is an internal regulation by the brain. The brain is telling the body to heat up. So if you dump them in a bath of ice water, the brain is just going to say, hey, I'm trying to aim for 102 degrees, so I'm going to create even more heat to try to make up for the ice bath that's going on. So there's really no quick way to drop a fever. That's an old school thing. You don't have to do it anymore. Luckily, my parents never tortured me by throwing me in an ice bath that I know of, but please don't tell me if you did. I hate cold water. And of course, last but not least, our fevers do not need antibiotics. A fever is just most likely, statistically speaking, a sign of a virus. And the general rule of thumb that we physicians use, at least for adults, is if you've been sick for 7 days, then you can consider getting antibiotics, but really we try to wait till 10 days. But that being said, you shouldn't really have a fever for more than 3 to 5 days. The flu is the only one that really causes fevers for that long. So I hope this wasn't too much of a rant. I hope this article was useful. If anyone wants to look it up, let's see where I found it in. It is in the Emergency Physicians Monthly, epmonthly.com, and this is the March edition of 2017, volume 24, number 3. So I hope this helps, and I hope it wasn't too much of a rant, guys. Stop stressing about fevers. Okay, bye.